So welcome. It's been a few days since we have talked Book of Mormon together, and I'm excited today. Don't turn off the video when I tell you what we're talking about. We're doing 1 Nephi 20, which is the first of the Isaiah chapters. I know Isaiah can be confusing. I've done some research over the last few years, and I hope I'm so not an Isaiah expert. I'm still just like a baby. But I hope something I share to you helps, gives you some context and clear on Isaiah's why, and that will help you understand a little bit better the Isaiah chapters. So 1 Nephi 20 is comparative to Isaiah 48. Isaiah started prophesying around 740 BC. I'm going to tell you, if you're following my Come Follow Me videos, I shared the Bible dictionary tool last week. Go there, and if you look under the comparison of the chronology, it's page 638 in your old school paper, you'll see where Isaiah comes up with the kings and the kingdoms. And that's really important to understand. Isaiah was likely a member of the Judea or Judah tribe. And he was in the southern kingdom. There was the 12 tribes of Israel, and the two, Benjamin and Judah, were in the southern kingdom. The other 10 tribes were in the northern kingdom and tended to be more rebellious and became the lost tribes. So even though Isaiah was writing for both the southern tribes and the northern tribes, a lot of what he was writing was for those northern tribes. The other thing that's super important to understand, Isaiah is writing past, present, future, all at the same time, which is super powerful literature-wise as you look at a literary pattern. If you're writing past, present, and future simultaneously, kind of an omniscient writing, it means that some of what he was writing was things that had happened and that were currently going to happen in the prophecy of that dispensation. But he was also writing for our dispensation, which is why Isaiah can get a little tricky. So I'm going to be looking at my notes here because there's a lot that I have tried to study and share to kind of help give context. The other thing that's important is when we're studying the Isaiah chapters in the Book of Mormon, there are pieces that come back that are restored. So look at the chapters before and after. Why would Nephi feel like from the plates of brass, he pulled these Isaiah prophecies? Why were they so important? Why? What was the context? What was happening before and after his reference to Isaiah? What was happening with his family that he felt like this is what really needs to be included? The other thing that's important is that Isaiah was a prophet for about 40 years. He was an advisor to Hezekiah, and he is the most quoted of all the prophets. Jesus quoted him, Peter, Paul, John, and Isaiah relates to these multiple time frames. And so sometimes we're talking about Isaiah's day, and sometimes we're talking about modern day. Nephi lived about 100 years later, and within 20 years of all of this prophecy that Isaiah was doing, the northern tribes were distributed or lost. So that's an important thing, I think, to understand as well. In verse 1, there's a mention of baptism, but do you realize, like, in the Old Testament, we know that the ordinance of baptism was happening, but it's not mentioned. And this is one of those restoration ordinances and covenants. It was still happening, but it was one of those lost treasures that in the Bible translation did not get preserved. And so as we see the Nephi version of Isaiah 48, we see that restored. There's a warning here as you go into the Nephi version, okay? A warning of worshiping idols. And I think, do we do that? I mean, we often read these Bible stories of warning and not worshiping the golden idols, but new iPhones, new houses, new cars, new clothes, trips, vacations. There's many things that we can worship. Maybe it's a exercise program or a diet program where we supplement or replace our God with an idol God that we feel can save us, help us, you know, bring us joy and peace and happiness. So I think that's an important thing. Isaiah was of the house of Judah, but because, like I shared, he wrote to the kingdom of Israel, because the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah, they were all of the same tribes. They're of those 12 tribes, but the northern tribe was called the kingdom of Israel, and the southern tribes were called the Judah tribes. And the northern tribes were a little bit more wicked. As you go through, you see the former things and the new things, the past and the present, and the stubbornness that Isaiah was so trying to show, these kind of hidden things to help this celestial world that we're living in, which is very much a furnace of affliction, right? And he is giving us these sometimes symbolic teachings. And I think symbols can be, and metaphors can be frustrating, because we want to know, like, what does that mean? What is the definition? And as you think about worshiping in the temple, right, there's so much symbolism. What's beautiful about teaching with symbolism and metaphors and analogies and parables, as Jesus did, is that it opens up to so many more learners. It doesn't matter where you're at, you can be taught by the Spirit at the level in which that symbol means something to you, and the Spirit reveals that. And so I really love that we have to rely on the Spirit to understand Isaiah. So he talks about how being refined in the furnace of affliction. And I love talking about metal refining. There's some amazing like poems out there. And if you really want to study metal work, you can really learn silversmith and in working with gold, how the fire gets so hot that it burns away the impurities, but doesn't get so hot that it destroys the metal, the gold or the silver. And also that the silversmith, the Savior in this case, right, never takes his eye off the fire. And he makes sure that it's never too hot, and that he's distracted, right? And isn't that comforting to know that God is aware of us when we're in the middle of an affliction and it is just feeling so intense? It's like chronic illness or long-term addiction or financial struggles or depression and anxiety, whatever that is, grief, right? Infertility. I'm trying to list some of the things that have touched my life and my family. And you feel like, God, where are you? Have you just left me here to be burned by this experience? And God is so clear that we are in a refining process, but he will never take his eye off of us. And then I love the words of Nephi and Isaiah here, where he talks about peace like a river and righteousness like a wave. And so I was kind of thinking about that peace as a river, as it flows down. Peace can kind of do that. It can get into all the crevices, right? But a wave is like a movement of emotion. And I thought like a hand of righteousness, right? This wave of righteousness that as you post, as you share, as you have Come Follow Me in your families, as you study your own Book of Mormon study each day, as you fast, as you worship in the temple, as you serve in callings, whatever you're doing, those are waves, hands of righteousness, reaching out that actually change, you know, the movement of whatever, like whatever ship is on the wave at the time. So I loved that symbolism. And then Isaiah and Nephi go on to talk about how God leads us through like the desert, and that there's water out of a rock, and that we thirst not. And it reminds me of the woman at the well story. If you're doing Come Follow Me right now and you've just read in the New Testament about the living water of Christ, living water, which is a source of a fountain of clear water, not further down the stream as it gets like, you know, mucky and grody. You know, that's an official word, grody. And so that the peace that comes from coming straight from the fountain, and that nourishment from living water. I heard it said that the sacrament, as we take that water and that bread, that water is blessed and consecrated to be as living water, the blood of Christ. Isn't that a great image to have in your heart and mind as you partake of the sacrament this week and think about what may be the furnace of affliction that you're going through, that Christ can come to heal in a way that nothing else can. I love these chapters of Isaiah, and I hope as we go through them, I can share information with you that helps you increase peace and hope that only comes through Christ. Because Isaiah was often talking with the divine investiture authority to speak for God. And that is what a prophet is asked to do at times. So sometimes the words of Isaiah will be the words of God himself, and sometimes they will be the words of a prophet. Thank you for joining me, and please join me in a few days for another Book of Mormon chapter.